Dan, from what you saw, what are your very earliest impressions of how he did today?
I would say the last 10 minutes of that pro day can't go much better. And they were the strength of his game. If you had asked me, Hannah, the number one thing that pops on tape is how good he throws the ball downfield. You know, the 15, 20, 25-plus yard throws. And, you know, when we were watching, I said, my goodness, he has a hand cannon. Just the throws down the field, the last 10 throws that he had, last 10 minutes of throws he had in this pro day were absolutely spectacular. There was a couple misses early on. He missed a slant, he missed it out, but that's going to happen at times. So I think, you know, with what we saw, which was the great majority of his throws, you have to be really encouraged. And I think the thing that I was looking for the most, Mike T, was how are his feet going to look? Those definitely looked much improved when it came to just the rhythm of his throwing rather than the natural talent and athleticism of him throwing.
Yeah, and to that point, Hannah, I think he looks a lot like Justin Herbert, big, strong, and athletic, and I think what we saw in the pro day was sort of like punctuated that, because the ball came out really easy, and he could get the ball down the field flawlessly.
Here with Mike T, with Dano, Mina Kimes is joining us as well. And I know that we all understood that that was his strength, right? Those huge throws. Also, people looking at, well, how does he handle some of the basics? Mina, what did you want to see today?
Yeah, I think everything that Dan touched on in terms of his footwork, the deep ball, which was his calling card in college, absolutely beautiful. There's only so much you can get out of a pro day, right? And I think a lot of the questions I have about Drake Maye weren't really ones that would be answered at the pro day. There were more questions about play under pressure, decision making, which of course you're just not going to see in this environment. But you saw the reason why teams are high on him, the reason why I'm high on him, which is the physical tools are immense. I think he's got just about as much arm talent as any prospect outside of, you know, the top three, Caleb Williams in particular. It's not just that he has a cannon, Dan. It's that when he throws the ball downfield, he's able to layer his throws. He throws with touch. It's so catchable. And yet, despite that, a lot of them were dropped, which is another point, I think, in his favor at UNC. So I'm a big fan of his, and that certainly hasn't changed today.
Yeah, I think the big thing, again, when you're watching pro day, when you're as talented a thrower and an athlete as Drake Maye is, you do want to put on a show. Like, you want to have the opportunity to say, in person, this is what makes me a little bit different. But you want to have the moments when you're watching his feet because you want the player to be very real. Mike T, you know this far greater than I, but you want those guys to have, you know, that ability to sit there and go, while I'm really good at this stuff, I know I have to work at this stuff. And I do think we saw him under center a little bit more, which he never did. I do think we saw him be forced to move his feet a little bit. Like that rep right there, I still see that his feet come together on his hitch. So I would sit there and I go, I want to see his feet stay a little bit more consistently under his shoulders rather than, you know, if you watch his feet, they go hitch and back. That's something where I sit there and I go, there's variance in movement there. I want to see it to be like this more. That's why when you say Herbert, I go, Herbert's a machine. He's where Drake still has a little bit of variance in there, and I think that leads to the occasional misses. And when I say misses, the ball is here rather than there.
Something that a lot of folks want to see him improve, and that they feel and that they feel that he can. We saw him there in the video, and he has been on the circuit. Lewis Riddick was our man on the scene today in Chapel Hill. Lewis, what were your impressions of Maye's pro day?
Well, I think he's definitely a work in progress in terms of making sure that he is able to repeat some of the things that I just heard Dan talking about here as I was getting wired up. As far as his feet, his hips, release points, I mean, all those things you can tell he's working hard on and he's putting in the time to do. And that's going to be a continuous work in progress that will contribute to the occasional misfire. When he is on, it is a sight to behold now. I mean, he threw some deep shots that you expected were going to absolutely wow the people in attendance here. I mean, he has got natural arm strength to be able to put this ball a long way down the field. He was, I thought, very accurate on the intermediate throws for the most part. He missed a couple deep outs to the left when he was throwing left, but everything to the right was pretty much on target. I think, you know, his athleticism, his ability to move within the pocket, is something that's not surprising. Does it look the same as Caleb? Does it look the same as Jaden? No, but we knew that it wasn't going to look the same as that, and that's fine too. I think obviously you can't see how he is going to look operating from under center and what kind of timing and rhythm and consistency he plays with when he's in that kind of environment, because that's just not what this pro day is going to showcase. But I think there's no doubt from a physical skills standpoint, which is something that all scouts, all general managers, all coaches absolutely get enamored with. He has all of those. On top of the fact that really the most important part of the evaluation, or just as important in the evaluation process, all of the off-the-field stuff, all of the football intelligence stuff, everybody here at North Carolina will tell you is off the charts with him. His makeup is off the charts with him. His football character, his family background is off the charts with him. So that's another factor that you're going to have to keep in mind here when you're talking about how our team's going to be looking at him. They'll feel as though all the other stuff they can possibly fix. But all that stuff that I just mentioned are the kind of things that, you know, are already a part of his foundation and people can feel comfortable with. So all in all, it's a great day for him, no question about that.
And you were so high on Jaden Daniels after seeing him in person yesterday, and you put him above Caleb Williams. After today, what order do you have these three top prospects in?
Look, I think it's important for me to stay consistent with marrying the tape with what I saw in these individual workouts. And for me, it would be Jaden, Caleb, and then Drake. And that's not, you know, if you're forcing me to put them in order, that's where I would put them in order. Ultimately, Hannah, we know that a lot of what's going to determine their success or failure is what happens once you get them in the building. And that's something I've been saying since day one of joining ESPN. The structure and environment that these guys are surrounded with, and then the choices that they're making also in their own individual lives are going to go a long way to determining whether or not they ultimately reach their ceiling. All three of these guys are super, super talented. But if you were forcing me to pick one out of that group of three, I'm going to go with Jaden, and then I would go with Caleb, and I would go with Drake. But all three of them have the potential to be Pro Bowlers and lead their team to some serious, serious big-time success.
And that would make this a very successful draft, unlike some others that we've seen. I mean, if that happens, if these three guys taken at the top are all Pro Bowlers and successful, wow, that would be a home run.
Go ahead, Hannah, go ahead.
We have a couple other guys I want to get to really quickly, because Michael Penix Jr. also with his pro day today at Washington. Rome Odunze did not work out today. He decided not to, but just moments ago, Michael Penix Jr. spoke with Molly McGrath, and also there is Field Yates. So Field, we're just getting this up to the second information. Tell us how Penix Jr. looked today.
Yeah, Hannah, good to be with you guys, and it's been a great day out here in Seattle watching Michael Penix Jr. take part in the Pro Day. I'm going to build up to the throwing session, which is, of course, the main event at any quarterback's Pro Day, as Michael Penix Jr. opted to do both the vertical jump and also the 40-yard dash prior to his throwing, something he did not do during the NFL Combine, and he impressed everybody who was watching here as he jumped 36.5 inches in the vertical and then ran, and of course every scout's watch is a little bit different, but somewhere between a 4.56 and 4.59 amongst the cluster of scouts that I was watching who were timing Michael Penix Jr., notably also Rome Odunze, who you mentioned did not take part in the on-field drills, was also working his own stopwatch when Michael Penix Jr. ran his 40. He was certainly happy to see his quarterback run a time that I think many people were not expecting, as Penix Jr. wanted to show that he is more than just a pocket passer. He is also a talented natural athlete. But of course, that all led up to the throwing session for Michael Penix Jr. And anybody who has seen him throw live understands that he has a rocket launcher attached to his left shoulder. And seeing it live and in person is just a little bit different. I saw it during the Senior Bowl, had a chance to see it again here, and the velocity and the force that he can generate with such an effortless motion is so unique. Now, that throwing motion is also unique, Hannah, but the ability to deliver the football to all levels down the field, and especially on those vertical shots, which I know Dan will tell you were as impressive as any quarterback in this entire draft class, today was certainly a positive day for Michael Penix Jr. with a massive crowd that included NFL head coaches and GMs here in Seattle.
Spent some time with him. His personality is evanescent. Like, he is so likable. You can see why he's a natural leader. And Dan, your point's well taken. 4 season-ending injuries, that's tough. But he did play in 28 games at the University of Washington. Yeah, right. And if you're running a 4.5 at his size, he's healthy. So it's a tough call. He's going to go in the first round. And
You think he's a first rounder?
And Dan, when you can make a throw like that, there's only about 4 or 5 other people on the planet, including the NFL, that can make that type of throw with that type of accuracy.
Okay, because that's interesting that you think now he has shot up these draft boards to the point where he's going to be taken in the first round.
Absolutely. Wait.
Round.
Yeah, there's 6 in the first round. I had him in my mock the other day, which was really good, by the way.
Yeah, we'll talk about your mock later.
Going 19 to the Rams. Like, if I'm the Rams, right, I have my first round pick since 2016. Why not take Michael Penix and let him sit for a year behind Matthew Stafford? Matthew Stafford's closer to the end than the beginning. And now all of a sudden you can operate Hannah from a position of strength. And to have a guy with his ability, as Field said, with a rocket launcher, I love it because, look, Matt Stafford, Dan had him in the Hall of Fame, 5 years ago. But Matt Stafford.
Before he actually ends up in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Story for another day. But in all seriousness, like, if you're the Rams and you could have Penix behind Stafford, I couldn't imagine a better situation long term for that franchise.
I mean, he's all over the place on these mocks. I mean, Matt Miller has him going 47th to the Giants overall. Mina, what do you think about his play? How does his style project to the NFL? And what are your impressions after what you've heard today?
Well, I think I'd rather have him on a team where he could play right away, to be honest, not just because of his age, but I do think he's quite pro-ready, and I think for a team like the Rams, you'd almost rather have a developmental, like raw prospect that you can sit behind Stafford for a year. But with Penix, there are still a couple of questions, and I think what he did today did go some way towards answering one of them, which is the athleticism, the mobility. First, I want to say I love that he ran at all, right? The competitive factor, the high expectations he set for himself that he talked about with Molly and then meeting them is tremendous. He doesn't need to be a dual threat in the NFL. He just needs to be a scrambler at the level of, say, Geno Smith in Seattle, where you're not going to call designed runs for him, but he can get out of a jam, and then most importantly, he can manipulate and manage a pocket, which is something we saw at times in Washington. The game against Texas comes to mind, but wasn't always a factor. The other thing you want to see from him, Mike, you highlighted some of those downfield throws all outside the numbers. Now, he is, I think, better at throwing outside the numbers than any quarterback in this class. But to make it in the NFL, you have to throw between the numbers as well. And we didn't see a ton of that at UW. Some of that was the design of the offense. Sure. But I think that's something that you want to see more of from Penix because he will have to do it at the next level.
Yeah, completed 39% of his passes outside the pocket, almost 70% inside the pocket.
It certainly didn't hurt him, Hannah, but I will say this, the juxtaposition yesterday of Malik Neighbors, saying, I ran, I'm going to run again, and then you have Rome Odunze, who ran a 4.45 at the combine. I really like. I tell these guys, you have so much to be proud of. Just go compete. I had a really unusual situation in Miami where we have Brandon Albert, a good left tackle, and all of a sudden Laramie Tunsil, who's the #1 guy on our board for a weird situation, falls down. We saw that as an opportunity. We had done our homework. And all I'm saying is you just never know what's going to happen in the draft. And go run some routes. Nothing bad's going to come out of it. So, again, I don't think he hurt himself today, but I would have loved to see him run routes, maybe not run the 40.
That was one of the wilder draft days in recent memory there in Chicago.
No, you were the guy that drafted him, Mike T.
Wow. Mina, back to these receivers. Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors. How close is Odunze to the others?
I mean, I view them as like a 1A, 1B, 1C. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but this trio, really is that good. I mean, Harrison Jr., such an amazing route runner. Neighbors, so explosive. But Rome Odunze might actually have the highest floor of them because, Dan, he's a human first down. It is impossible for me to imagine a world in which he's not productive in the NFL because of how well-rounded and reliable is, how good his hands are. And I'll add this, he is not as explosive as Neighbors, for example. Very few humans are. But I actually think his athleticism, particularly relative to his size, is a little bit underrated, and some of the lack of production after the catch had as much to do with Washington's offense and the types of routes he ran and the way he was targeted. So I wouldn't be surprised if you actually see some upside there when he goes to the NFL.
Yeah, whoever drafts Rome Odunze essentially drafts Larry Fitzgerald or DeAndre Hopkins. That's kind of what he's going to be at the NFL level. I know in a lot of people's eyes he's going to be the third receiver. I'll tell you 3 things that he does the best in this class. Number 1, watch his eyes. tracking a football. He tracks the football when it's up in the air better than the other two guys, and they're tremendous players. 2, I think his body control is off the charts. That's the Larry Fitzgerald comp. And then 3, his ball skills are DeAndre Hopkins-like. So I don't know if he's going to be the guy that, Malik Neighbors, I think, is going to just run explosively by people. And I think Marvin Harrison is going to wear people out with his routes. I don't know if Rome is going to consistently create this massive amount of separation. You're not going to have a lot of incompletions thrown his way. I mean, he is, again, the style is Larry and DeAndre.
I mean, 2 of the most reliable receivers of all time.
Yeah, and the comp for me, guys, is Terrell Owens. And when you look at the big plays that Terrell Owens had in his career, he could run away from people, but Hannah, he was so hard to tackle. Right, and what I'm saying here, I agree with Mina that the run after catch was there because of their style, but in the NFL, he is going to be hard to tackle. There's not a lot of corners or safeties that are going to be able to tackle someone that big and that fast, and that was T.O.'s game. When he got into the secondary, he was hard to tackle, and I'm telling you, that's where Rome is going to separate himself from most other receivers. He is going to be hard to tackle once he gets rolling.
Oh my gosh, Mina, who's your comp? Listen to all the names we've been throwing around.
I know. I was like, God, could I come up with an even better player? We're only reaching for the best receivers in the history of the NFL. I mean, I like all of your guys' comps a little bit. I think maybe they're a little bit lofty, but that's only because we're talking about the best to ever do it. So that's all.
There you go. I love it. Yeah, he's exciting. Yards after the catch, everything. It's the whole package. We love it. Yes, and we're just throwing names around, right? We can do that.
Yeah.
They haven't played in the NFL yet, so why not?